I'm really impressed by the turnout. Thank you for coming. I know it's a free film, but the effort just to come and see a film, I think, is enough. Particularly on a night when the Cesar Chavez movie is also debuting. And it's an honor for me to have Zoot Suit shown on the same night. Because really, movies are about heroes and sheroes, and it's really important to create images that last, that go through the generations. Growing up, like everyone else, I was a fan of Batman, and I was a fan of Superman, and Captain Marvel. I don't even remember who Captain Marvel was, but he was around. And they used to make movies about these characters, and even before Superman could fly, then they made cartoons of him flying, mixed with live action, and that was a little funky. But in any case, the children, the young people have to have heroes. So we had cowboys, we had all kinds of different heroes. But I never found any Chicano heroes. I always felt that something was missing, particularly superheroes. So in Zoot Suit tonight, you're going to see one of the first Chicano superheroes ever put on film. And as it turns out, he's a Pachuco. El Pachuco, portrayed by Eddie Olmos. So just as a storyteller, and as a filmmaker, and as for you as an audience, I hope you can enjoy this film just as an adventure, of a superhero. Because my conception of El Pachuco was to create a magical being who was not exactly human. He could survive. I needed to tell this story in a specific way that was not going to be a downer. In actuality, in terms of the history of the case that this movie deals with, it was a victory. It was one of the greatest victories that the Mexican-American community, the minority community in the United States had up until that time. This year is the 70th anniversary of the victory of the Sleepy Lagoon case. Because in 1942, when members of the Sleepy Lagoon gang were put on trial, in a mass trial, 22 gang members accused of a single death, it was never proven who killed Jose Sanchez, Jose Diaz, actually, in reality. Never proven who actually killed him, but so they blamed the whole gang, and then 12 of them were sent to San Quentin, 4 of them for life. And so that was a real case. So the community sprang to action. The Mexican-American community, the African-American community, the Jewish community, the Hollywood community, the labor community, all of these communities came to the fore to the defense of these guys. And everyone from people that were in the rank and file of the labor movement to Hollywood stars like Anthony Quinn and Gene Kelly and Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth came to the defense of these guys. So there's a lot of history behind the event itself. As a playwright, I had to decide which story I was going to tell. I knew about Pachucos from my very early life. The first Pachucos I ever met were actually on the streets of Delano, on the west side, in Chinatown, in Delano. We had chucotes, you know what I'm saying? Walking the streets, even in that little rural town. And I'm sure Modesto had them, and I'm sure, Fresno had them, West Side and Fresno. The whole valley and all along Highway 99 had Pachucos. Because it was a phenomenon that was happening all across America in the 1940s. It was attached to the whole idea of swing music and jazz. And actually it was the fusion. African Americans were the ones that invented the Zoot Suit, like they invented jazz, like they invented swing music. And other minorities picked up on it. Not just Latino minorities, but the Irish kids and the Jewish kids also picked up. And they started wearing Zoot Suits. So it became a very cool thing to do in the streets of America in the 1940s. But Chicanos in LA and in California were ostracized for wearing the Zoot Suit because it was considered to be a sign of their criminality. That together with marijuana, because it became like a real stigma. Marijuana was not illegal in the 1930s. It was made illegal in 1937, partly because of the Pachuco phenomenon, because there were too many of these young men that were toking up. And so they figured it must be evil. And so it was declared illegal even though it was not a lethal drug per se. And so there are a lot of ramifications that come out of the whole Pachuco phenomenon, the way that the Pachucos dress, the way that they behave. But it's all part of American cultural life. That's really part of the point. For me, the zoot suit that they were wearing was part of their American identity. Now, when you think about life in the cities, you think about African Americans, for instance, coming out of the South with the great migration into the North and into the East and into the West. African Americans leaving the plantations of the South and then taking to a new urban life in Chicago and places like that and trying to find an urban expression that fit their new way of life. That's why jazz fit the bill. You see, this is why, again, the zoot suit began to give them a way to be urban. And Chicanos were no different. Mexicanos coming out of Mexico, out of the ranchos in Mexico, because there were very few cities, as you know, in Mexico, especially in the 1920s and 1930s. You were from DF, you know, from Mexico City. You had a city you can relate to, from Guadalajara también, pero from there, all those cities began to get really, really small. So most of the Mexicans that lived in Los Angeles were descended from families that came from rural areas. And if they came from the valley, I mean, they were rural campesinos, you know. But they wanted to dress up for the big time. They wanted to dress up for the city. And so the idea of wearing zoot suits became un estilo de moda, you know, de urbana. It became a real urban style, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Con el pantalón guango, see, you know? And with it came a way of talking. That was the Pachuco patois was slang. And it was like playing with the language, you know, it was playing with, maybe the Pachucos weren't completely bilingual, they knew some Spanish and some English, and so some of it was Spanglish, and they created a language of their own. Órale, pues, carnal, llévate las guayas y liviana el esqueleto, carnal, ¿por qué te traes? ¿Qué pasó de congestiones, vato? You know, and so these were new words that they were creating, taking Spanish and changing it, using some calor, which really descends from the gypsies, mixing it with words of their own invention. You know, estamos coriqueando, you know, órale, vamos a parquear el carro, la carrucha, ¿me entiendes? Parquear, coming from where shall we park the car, and stuff. Órale, aquí estamos. And tómate una birria, say, you know. In Mexico, birria is meat, you know what I mean? It's barbecue. But here, since you're talking about beer, the Chicanos, the Pichucos use words like birria. Échate una birria, carnal, órale, have a birria, you know. And so if you're coming from Mexico and someone offered you a birria, you think they were offering you meat, you know. But the Pachucos were drinking beer and calling it birria, you know. Or they go into a restaurant, you know, and ask, somebody asks, what are you going to eat? You know, no, pues, tráeme una taza de aceite con unos de lámina, you know, y otros de cemento, carnal, o tal vez una taza de aceite con una llanta, carnal. And you know what that was? Una taza de aceite con una llanta was a cup of coffee and a donut. A taza de aceite is a cup of oil, and una llanta is a tire. And so it was a way of talking that was slang, you know, but it was fun. And so I wanted to capture that sense of fun in the Pachuco. Even though society out here, Anglo society at large, thought the Pachucos were dangerous. They thought they were really criminal. But actually, these were young people dressing up, and the girls, the young women, were just as bad as the guys, you know. I mean, bad in the good sense, you know. Because they wore short skirts. You know, no Mexican woman would be caught, you know, wearing a minifalda, you know. But they wore skirts, really. And fishnet stockings, you know, and the fingertip coat that went even lower than the skirt. The skirt was up here, the coat was down here, you know. They wore makeup. They had tattoos. They had the pompadour, the whole stilo, you know. So all of that was shocking to their families. But this was a whole new generation of American kids. And that's part of the point, that they were Chicanos, but they were Americans. And they were expressing themselves in a new way. And I wanted to capture that spirit. But at the same time, I wanted to talk about this case in a serious way, that this was a historical landmark case, you know, fought in the courts and won in the courts. Even though 12 of these guys were sent to San Quentin, 4 of them for life, and they spent their time in San Quentin, Quilmas, you know, in Big Q. And eventually, of course, they were released. 70 years ago, they were released, and it was a tremendous victory. Now, when I was commissioned to do a play for the Marqueco Forum in Los Angeles, the music center, and I was given a limit. They said you could do this with 12 characters. And this is for the New Theater for Now program over there. And we're going to go on main stage, but it was only for 2 weeks. It was no big deal. But I got a chance to do a lot of research. I went to the New Collections Library at UCLA. I actually got to see the letters that the guy sent from prison. I got to see photographs. I got to see documents. And so I actually got to do the research. I studied the appeal brief, 6,000 pages, which I then reduced down to 12 pages that are in the script. And so it's based in reality, the way I use real documents in order to document the case. And another way that I needed to document was to put the music. To put the music because the zoot suit was made for dancing, you know what I mean? Swing music, the jitterbug, órale. A levantar, tirar ancla, sí, tirar ancla. Means throw your ankle. Tirar ancla means throw your ankle, so you're doing the jitterbug, you're doing the Lindy Hop. And so I needed to capture the sound. Unfortunately, there was Lalo Guerrero, the godfather of Chicano music. And back in the 1940s, he actually created numbers. He wrote music with his big band. He had a big band at the time. And he recorded it. And so an ethnomusicologist sent me this music, and I said, this is it. And I knew Lalo. I'd known Lalo for quite a long time because he was my dad's cousin. So when I was a little kid, you know, barefoot in the barrio, I used to chase his car. Man, he was the only guy that had a big car. And he was a star, as far as I was concerned. He was in movies and stuff, you know. And when I was in college, I used to go to the dances. When the band came to town and they played, I used to go and dance, you know. But the thing is that I came to him and then asked him if I could incorporate his music into the play, and he gave me his permission. So the music that you're going to hear in this movie is his music, you know, the Zoot Suit Boogie. Chicas Patas Boogie originally, Vamos a Bailar, you know, Chucos Suaves, Marihuana Boogie, all of that, you know, it's from Lalo. It's from Lalo Guerrero. So I'm really thankful to Lalo Guerrero, the late great Lalo Guerrero, for his contribution to this film. If it hadn't been for him, we wouldn't have captured the sound of Pachucos either, because he recorded in Modo de Hablar, in the patois of Pachucos, so I went with that. And fortunately, again, he was still alive, and toured, you know, with us when we did Zoot Suit. The last time we went on a national tour. But the thing is that the music, the style of dress, when we were looking to make costumes, there in downtown LA, we found a tailor, an 84-year-old tailor, who had made the original Zoot Suits for the Pachucos back in the 40s. And that's how we got the pattern for the Zoot Suits that you see in this film. And we had a lot of Zoot Suits, and they were really expensive to make, so we had to make it in Tijuana. I was striving for authenticity in every way that I can. Now, the play itself, New Theater for Now, that led to the main season.